Part 9. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 81. There are no secrets under the sun, and the news of the one-time discovery of the finless porpoise spread that night. Early the next morning, Wang Jianxi personally led people to the edge of Shuahun Lake. Along with it, there were two large trucks carrying a lot of various supplies and equipment. Xiao Su, you did a good job. Fortunately, Wang Jianxi didn't have the habit of patting people on the shoulder. He came up and shook Su Ming's hands vigorously. Uncle Wang, your guidance is very good. Su Ming chuckled softly. Wang Jianxi also smiled. After seeing that there were no outsiders around, he smiled and said, "You are a good boy. You have made great achievements this time. Do you have any requirements?" Wang Hao is now hanging out with Su Ming. He has nothing to do for a month, just sitting and earning tens of thousands of yuan. Su Ming has now made a great contribution, which is also helpful to Wang Jianxi's career. Wang Jianxi naturally does not hesitate to contribute in some aspects. Give Su Ming the green light. Su Ming thought for a while, but he really didn't have any requirements for the time being. It can't be said that there is none at all. It should be said that the time has not yet come. Wang Jianxi is giving him big policies. His current strength cannot handle it, and he cannot afford to waste this favor for petty gains. Young people, take a broader view. Chairman Mao once said that there is a lot to do in the vast world. Wang Jianxi looked meaningfully at the mountains behind Shuahun Lake. It was just right for this purpose. No matter how deep or shallow it was, it would not be appropriate. Su Ming also laughed and said, "Then I will need more guidance from the leader in the future." By Shuahun Lake, Professor Chu and Director Song had already led people to adjust the equipment and set up a temporary rescue center in the shallow water area to prepare for treatment. The police station sent 2 sergeants and 7 or 8 auxiliary police officers to set up a large cordon around the area. A group of zoo employees who had nothing to do gathered around the cordon and pointed at the finless porpoise in the water. On the lake, a few scattered boating tourists were also attracted, rowing their boats closer to the side, and looking over with open eyes. A large group of reporters got the news from nowhere and appeared at the lake with long guns and cannons. "Excuse me, who discovered the finless porpoise?" "Hello, I am a reporter from the Daily News. Are these finless porpoises wild?" Director Wang, may I ask?" Wang Jianxi smiled and waved to the reporters and said, "Dear journalists, the finless porpoise is an important protected animal in our country and is endangered. This time, with the assistance of the Yangchuan Zoo and the Academy of Agricultural Sciences, we found 3 at once. Wild finless porpoise, this is unprecedented. Now, the big finless porpoise needs to be treated, so Professor Chu and Director Song are temporarily unable to accept interviews. The finless porpoise is seriously injured, and please don't rush to take photos of the finless porpoise to avoid this. Cause secondary damage." There were too many reporters present, and one provincial station even broadcast live. When Wang Jianxi said this, the reporters immediately went crazy. According to Wang Jianxi's intention, they were not allowed to interview. When the reporters were almost noisy, Wang Jianqi said calmly, "Don't misunderstand me. If friends from the press have anything to ask, Comrade Su Ming from the zoo will answer you." "Haha, by the way, I just answered regarding my friend's question. The first person to discover the injured finless porpoise was Comrade Su Ming. Comrade Su searched for the finless porpoise in the lake for 8 hours regardless of his own safety, and finally found traces of the finless porpoise in an abandoned reed swamp. Comrade Su Ming is the great contributor to the search and rescue team. Xiao Su, please tell everyone." Su Ming stood up with a smile and nodded to a group of reporters. "Master Su. Comrade Su. Handsome guy." Before Su Ming could speak, more than a dozen microphones were handed over to him. The nearest microphone almost poked him in the mouth due to excessive force. Su Ming hurriedly took a few steps back, escaped from the crowd of reporters, jumped onto a tehu stone by the lake, and said loudly to the reporters from a high position, "Everyone, there are too many people, so I can't answer them all." In this way, invite a reporter to ask questions specifically. If you have any questions, tell the journalist who asked the question and I will answer them all. Without waiting for the people below to agree or disagree, Su Ming pretended to be casual and pointed at the group of reporters, "This beauty, please come and ask questions." "Huh? Oh, okay, thank you." Nangongyan had been following Su Ming for a long time, and her acting skills had soared, with an unexpected expression on her face. People who don't know the inside story can't tell that there is anything fishy between these two guys. "Excuse me." In the special care unit of Yangchuan First People's Hospital, Zhou Jin finally passed the critical stage and could barely eat some liquid food last night. When people are sick, they miss family ties the most. At this time, the ward was empty except for the sound from the TV. Zhou Jin was lying alone on the hospital bed, his chest wrapped in a thick bandage, feeling very uncomfortable. If we had not been mixed up in society at the beginning, but had divided ourselves into a family, maybe now the children would be able to play soy sauce, and I would not have been so seriously injured, and no one would care about me. His life was saved, but 6 ribs were broken, several internal organs were injured, and his spleen was ruptured. The doctor said that I would need to recuperate in the hospital for half a year before being discharged, and that I should not work too hard or get angry in the future. A vague figure appeared in his mind. She was a little village girl. A few years ago, her family also raised fish near Shuahun Lake. He once got drunk and forced himself on the little village girl. Later, he forced and threatened her and gave her 20,000 yuan to settle the matter. And the little village girl's family also lost its reputation because of this incident, and had to give up the fish pond and move to another place. Damn it, if I had just gritted my teeth and married that woman, Zhou Jin regretted secretly. These few days of recuperation in the hospital, Zhou Jin not only wanted to start a family, but also used the rare free time to calm down and think about a series of accidents that had happened recently. The bald man was injured continuously, the fry were lost, and he was almost killed by a big fish this time. Although there was no evidence, Zhou Jin felt that it was not accidental after years of experience in the society. He had many enemies, but for some reason, he suspected Su Ming. Since the boy appeared, strange things have happened one after another. "Comrade Su Ming, it is said that you have been working in the zoo for just over a month, and you have won the title of excellent employee. This time in Huading Reservoir, you saved the finless porpoise regardless of your own safety." Su Ming, Huading Reservoir, finless porpoise, a few keywords immediately attracted Zhou Jin's attention. He struggled to tilt his head and watched TV with the corner of his eye. On TV, the familiar-looking young man had a sunny smile on his face that made Zhou Jin hate him. "It's him. What's wrong with the reservoir? What's the matter with the finless porpoise?" Zhou Jin quickly called the nurse and asked the nurse to call the bald man. On the other end of the phone, the bald man told Zhou Jin everything that happened. Zhou Jin's face became uglier and uglier, and his heart was bleeding. What hit him was actually a Yangtze River finless porpoise, and there were 3 of them in the same nest. If I get them and secretly sell them to some foreign collectors, it will definitely not be a small amount of money. If I find finless porpoises somewhere else, it's fine, but those finless porpoises were found in the reservoir, they grew up eating my fish, and they almost took my life. Then they should be mine. If he had held on for a while and not fainted, but had directed Baldy and the others to catch those porpoises. The more Zhou Jin thought about it, the angrier he became. It seemed as if a big stone was pressing on his chest, and he couldn't breathe. Protecting animals is everyone's responsibility, and it's my duty to contribute to the country. As for government rewards, that's not important, Su Ming said seriously on TV. Zhou Jin's eyes suddenly widened, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood beads sprayed more than half a meter high, and then fell straight down, splattering all over his head and face. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 82. Master Su, I heard that you are very good at training animals. Last time, you trained a few lucky cats to collect money, which caused quite a stir among the citizens. And this time, it is said that you have tamed 2 baby porpoises in just one day. Is it true? My father taught me all of them. I am a second-generation animal trainer, Su Ming said seriously. Nangongyan raised the corner of her mouth and asked with a smile, "Can we call the baby porpoise out of the water and let us take a picture?" "Don't worry, we will stand farther away and will never alarm the mother porpoise." This is not Nangongyan's request alone, but the collective will of the general public. Other reporters also started to make a fuss and asked to take pictures of the baby porpoises. They couldn't hide their expectations. Most viewers are kind-hearted and like animals. Usually, taking pictures of giant pandas or something can increase the ratings a lot. At this time, there are 2 wild baby porpoises in the lake that are more precious than giant pandas. How could they miss such a good opportunity? Let's do this, everyone, follow me, stand on the shore, and try not to make a loud noise. Su Ming stood by the lake, with a row of long and short guns behind him, staring at the lake. He put 2 fingers in his mouth and blew 3 whistles, 2 long and 1 short, at the lake. A few minutes later, there was a sudden movement on the calm lake. "Here they come," someone said nervously. In the distance, 2 finless porpoises about half a meter long suddenly emerged from the water. Everyone thought they were going to jump like dolphins, but they didn't jump. Instead, they exposed half of their bodies on the water, as if they were racing on the water, facing the direction of the wind, stepping on the water, and running towards the shore against the wind. Finless porpoises are strong creatures. They will go out of the water against the wind in the direction of the wind. This is the legendary finless porpoise worshipping the wind, Su Ming explained mysteriously. Click, 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 there was a sound of filming behind him. The reporters were relatively public-spirited. In order to avoid scaring the baby finless porpoises, they basically turned off the flash. Under the attention of the crowd, the 2 little porpoises soon reached the shore. Porpoises and dolphins are similar in character, lively and active, not afraid of people, but a little crazy. Seeing so many people paying attention to them, the 2 little guys didn't need Su Ming's command at all. Like synchronized swimmers, they half floated on the water, their 2 fins like 2 arms, waving up and down happily around them, and turning a few circles in place from time to time, splashing water. Nangongyan is a little girl after all. Seeing that the little porpoise is so cute, she couldn't help but bend down and squat on the river bank to touch the porpoise's head. Before her hand reached the porpoise, a little guy suddenly sprayed a small stream of water, spraying Nangongyan's head and face. The reporters around finally couldn't help laughing, and turned the camera, taking Nangongyan as material and filming together. Su Ming handed a handkerchief to Nangongyan, put it close to her ear, and smiled softly. "Is this the legendary that thing?" "That thing?" Nangongyan asked while wiping her face. "It's that thing," Su Ming said. "What that thing? Explain it clearly. Otherwise you're dead." Nangongyan opened her eyes wide and looked puzzled. Su Ming smiled evilly and said, "But you insisted on me saying it." "Yan, shoot you to death," Nangongyan said halfway before she reacted. Her face flushed, and she immediately changed her words like she brake suddenly, and pushed Su Ming hard. Su Ming was standing on the shore, and was pushed by her like this, and he immediately lost his balance and fell headfirst into the lake. A few bubbles popped up on the water surface, and Su Ming gradually sank into the lake. Nangongyan's color changed slightly, and she shouted at the lake, "Hey, hey, are you okay?" Many other reporters also gathered around, staring at the lake nervously. The 2 little porpoises looked like nothing had happened. Instead of trying to save him, they happily circled around the place where Su Ming fell into the water. "Hey, go save him." Nangongyan couldn't swim, and her anxious face turned pale as she yelled at the two porpoises. Several male reporters had taken off their shirts and shoes, ready to go into the water to save people. At this moment, more than 20 meters away from the shore, a wave suddenly rose on the water, reaching more than 2 meters high. In the waves, Su Ming rode on the back of a big black carp, floated to the surface, and waved his hands vigorously at the reporters on the shore, all wet. The big black carp held Su Ming and swam towards the shore, shaking its head. It was not fast, and swam in an H-shaped pattern at a leisurely pace, as if it was deliberately showing off its swimming skills. This scene was even more shocking than the Yangtze River dolphin. The reporters were all smart people. Of course, they would not miss this excellent subject. They quickly moved their cameras and focused on Su Ming's direction from a distance. Su Ming rode on the big blackfish and was not in a hurry to get ashore. Seeing that the reporters were excited to take pictures, he simply grabbed the fins on the back of the big blackfish with both hands and manipulated the big blackfish to swim around in the water. "He is the Blue Wave Knight," someone in the crowd suddenly shouted. Hearing this shout, several reporters immediately remembered the video pinned on Youku. They hadn't remembered it just now, but now they saw that the person riding the fish in the video was really Su Ming in front of them. This is good. Originally, I only wanted to shoot one news, but now it has become two big news. This trip is profitable. "What is that thing?" someone pointed to the water and asked. Su Ming was riding the wind and waves. 4 long shark fins appeared on the water behind him. He followed them slowly, creating 5 long water lines on the water. The creatures under the water occasionally revealed their true appearance, and turned out to be several huge carps and herrings that were over 1 meter tall. The water surface of Shuahun Lake turned into a vast grassland. Su Ming rode a big herring and took 4 other big fish with him, galloping freely on the lake. Su Ming played on the water for more than 10 minutes, and the reporters on the shore probably took enough pictures. Then he steered the big herring to the shore, carefully stepped on the big herring's smooth back, and jumped onto the shore. "You scared me to death," Nangongyan said. Su Ming laughed. "Don't worry, this is my territory." The other reporters didn't care about Su Ming's life or death. They rushed up and surrounded Su Ming. They didn't care about the rule of one person asking questions just mentioned. They asked all kinds of questions. "Excuse me, are you the man with feet on blue waves on Youku? Did you also train those big fish? Everyone, please be quiet. As you can see, those fish have been tamed and can usually act as lifeguards, so there is no need to worry about safety when boating on Shuahun Lake," Su Ming said. A reporter in the back row suddenly asked loudly, "Master Xiao Su, have you ever considered launching a fish riding entertainment project in the future?" Su Ming smiled slightly at the camera. "The conditions are not mature yet, so we won't start it for the time being, but..." He changed the subject. "In the near future, this business will definitely exist. In fact, it is not just about riding fish. The zoo will have a variety of interesting projects in the future, and Lucky Cat is just the first step. I hope you can always pay attention to Yangchuan Zoo and us, and I will definitely bring you a world full of magical animals." As if to comment on Su Ming's words, 2 finless porpoise babies, one on the left and one on the right, jumped out of the water and passed each other, creating an arch-like splash of water. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 83. Su Ming also considered how to arrange the 5 big fish. The smallest of these 5 fish weighed more than 100 jin, and the largest black carp weighed 180 jin. They certainly couldn't be killed for meat or sold like ordinary fish. In modern society, it is extremely rare for fish to grow to such a large size. It takes at least several decades. In the words of the older generation, such big fish are spiritual and it is unknown if they are killed. As for releasing them, that's nonsense. Not to mention that Su Ming bought them with money. Even if he really released them, they might be caught by people downstream in a few days. These days, there are sand mining ships and fishing boats everywhere in the rivers, and the sewage is serious. The living environment of wild animals has been destroyed. It is probably better for these fish to live with Su Ming in the wild. In the final analysis, Su Ming is not a great and glorious person in his bones. He is too lazy to do things that sacrifice himself for the public. Under normal circumstances, most of the fish that are caught will be exhibited and charged admission. People want to see something rare. Such big fish, and 5 at once, there must be many people willing to spend money to see them. Su Ming thought further. He has the ability of animal friends. If he only uses a few big fish for exhibition, it would be a waste of resources. As he said to the reporter, he really wants to develop a riding fish project. Riding horses is very common, but riding fish is unprecedented. Zoos all over the world, including Disney, do not have a riding fish project. Raising horses is very expensive. A batch of good horses is expensive in itself. In addition to feed and artificial maintenance, the investment is huge. At the same time, riding horses is relatively dangerous, so it is not so popular in China. Big fish are different. 5 fish together cost less than 10,000 yuan. A good horse costs more than this price for one leg. It is easy to deal with them because they eat and drink. They eat what the fish in the lake eat. They are not easy to get sick and are very easy to raise. Therefore, the prospects of the riding fish project are beyond doubt. But if we want to really come up with a safe and fun fish riding project, the conditions are not yet mature. Su Ming can control these big fish with his mental power, but it doesn't mean that other people can ride them. If someone else were to do it, the big fish would not let the other person ride them obediently, and Su Ming would need to slowly teach them. In addition, the management problem needs to be solved. Like the cruise project, the fish riding project definitely needs people to manage it, and they must have certain professional knowledge. The keepers of ordinary aquariums can do this job, but Yangchuan Zoo is very poor, and there are no decent aquatic creatures at all, let alone the high-end configuration of aquariums, and of course there are no aquarium keepers. It can't be said that there are no aquatic creatures. In fact, there are still many aquatic creatures in the zoo, and they are all in the Shuahun Lake. Although there are no rare protected animals, at least there are enough. The fish riding project cannot be launched for the time being. Not only the fish riding, but also the cruise business has been suspended due to the arrival of the finless porpoise family to avoid the injured finless porpoise from being frightened. Professor Chu kept his word and allocated 2,000 yuan from the research funds to Su Ming to compensate him for his losses during this period. 2,000 yuan. Su Ming was speechless when he received the money. Not to mention the losses of the cruise business, the fish eaten by the 2 little porpoises recently alone were probably more than 2,000 yuan. These 2 little guys are worthy of the name. They are really as hungry as pigs. Although they are small in size, they are not much bigger than babies. But they play and eat from morning to night. They can eat several large buckets of food a day. As the saying goes, a child without a mother is the most pitiful, but it is just the opposite for Su Ming. Su Ming is reluctant to treat these 2 guys badly. He did not let them eat the 4 major carps in the lake. Instead, he went to the market every day to buy anchovies, big silverfish and perch, which are the favorite foods of porpoises. God and the Constitution both say that all people are born equal. By analogy, animals should also be equal. In fact, this is absolutely nonsense. Just like people with good looks are treated preferentially wherever they go, as 2 of the few remaining wild finless porpoises in the world, the treatment of the two finless porpoise babies is the best in the entire zoo. After a few days, the appetites of the two boys have been spoiled, and they are disdainful of the ordinary domestic fish in the lake. Despite this, Su Ming was really embarrassed to complain about the small amount of money. Just for the 2,000 yuan subsidy, the investigation team held a special discussion meeting and went through a lot of procedures before it was approved. It is glorious to protect animals, but no matter how well you do, you can't increase the country's GDP by a dime. Professor Chu and his team have insufficient funds all year round, and being able to take out 2,000 yuan is already very considerate. Su Ming is too lazy to worry about this little money now, so he simply drove a small assault boat himself, moored in the middle of Shuahun Lake, lying on a recliner to bask in the sun, and spreading his mental power into the water. During this period, the fish in the lake have grown a circle. At this crazy growth rate, they can be sold in a few months. Several alligator gars have been much more well-behaved recently. Without Su Ming's control, they would go to Huading Reservoir on time every day to find food. When they were full, they would come back and rest in the water area designated by Su Ming. This saved Su Ming a lot of worry. The alligator turtles and big-headed catfish had nothing to do. They only ate all day long and grew taller. The alligator turtles were better. They mainly grew muscles and looked like a bodybuilder. With their ferocious shells, they looked quite majestic. If they went out in the middle of the night, they would probably scare a lot of people. Big Head is not so good. He is fat and stupid, and has the tendency to mutate into a pig. At first glance, he looks like a fat black porpoise. The mother porpoise is receiving treatment, and the baby porpoise is out of control. He hangs around in the water army lake like two idle ruffians all day long. Sometimes when he sees tourists, he pops up to spray water, spins around and twists his butt to get some food and screams from little girls. When they saw Su Ming's boat coming, the two baby porpoises made cheerful calls from a distance, jumped out of the water against the wind, and jumped to the side of the speedboat in a few steps. They stood up straight and twisted on the water. Su Ming threw a perch out of the bucket. The perch was in the air and had not fallen into the water yet. The baby porpoise waiting on the side of the boat jumped, its tail close to the water, as if gliding on the water, and grabbed the perch in one bite. The other baby porpoise didn't get to eat, and cried anxiously, stepping on the water and lying on the side of the boat with its fins, its round head desperately arched towards the bucket. "You look useless." Su Ming caught another squid and threw it over. The squid's tentacles parted in the wind and hit the baby porpoise's face. The baby porpoise opened its mouth wide, leaned back slightly, and then sucked hard, like sucking noodles, and sucked the whole squid into its stomach. "Don't eat it, go see your mother." See your mother has recently become a popular word in Yangchuan City. Since the TV reported the three porpoises in the zoo, a large number of tourists have come every day to see this animal that is rarer than the giant panda. Later, I don't know who wrote a funny article on the internet, the name of which is "I'm here to see your mother." This article went viral overnight, and "see your mother" became a popular word, referring to seeing something rare. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 84. In fact, due to the need for treatment, finless porpoise mothers are strictly protected. Reflective cordons are set up around a treatment room built on the edge of Shuahun Lake, and police officers from the police station are patrolling to prevent anyone from approaching. Therefore, most tourists have no chance to see the giant finless porpoise with their own eyes. Although they did not have the opportunity to see the giant finless porpoise, the tourists did not feel disappointed. Their attention was quickly attracted by two small finless porpoises playing in the lake. Young finless porpoises are affectionate by nature, and with Su Ming's secret instructions, they will also intentionally approach tourists, behaving cutely and coquettishly at close range, and quickly capture the hearts of many tourists. In the past few days, the zoo's ticket sales have surged, making Sister Tong smile from ear to ear. By the way, Shuahun Lake has also become famous. In the treatment room, in order to prevent the finless porpoise from being frightened and infected, only Professor Chu and a few medical staff can enter and exit. Other employees of the zoo, including Director Song, are not allowed to enter or exit at will. Although Su Ming is the savior of the finless porpoise, he is not a medical staff after all. He has nothing to do with treating the finless porpoise. At the beginning, he was also a person who was prohibited from entering and exiting at will. But for some reason, after the giant finless porpoise regained its strength, it actually refused to take medicine and was very resistant to human beings. As long as there were people in the treatment room, the giant finless porpoise would be very nervous and refuse to accept the treatment honestly. It kept acting chaotically, twisting. After such a disturbance, not only was the finless porpoise unable to recover, but its condition showed signs of worsening. Professor Chu is an expert in this field and has encountered this situation more than once. The giant finless porpoise was originally a wild animal, but later it was injured because it hit a person. Most likely it has a psychological shadow on humans. In order for the finless porpoise to receive treatment, Professor Chu arranged for medical staff to inject a sedative into the finless porpoise. But every time when the tranquilizer wears off, the finless porpoise starts to make a fuss again. Sedatives and anesthetics, if injected multiple times, will cause irreversible damage to the organism, reduce biological functions and IQ, and may directly turn into an idiot plant fish. The finless porpoise is now a treasure. The government, media, and the public are all watching. There must be no mistakes. Professor Chu does not dare to be harsh, but he cannot let the finless porpoise die of serious injuries. In just 2 or 3 days, he tried many methods, but none of them worked. He was so anxious that his hair turned white. After Director Song heard about it, he lightly reminded Lao Chu, "Xiao Su is the savior of the giant finless porpoise, why not let Xiao Su try it? This kid is very good at dealing with animals." The thorny animals in the zoo are all obedient and ruthless under his command. Lao Chu didn't have much hope at first. The animals in the zoo are all artificially raised and are completely different from wild finless porpoises. Being able to tame animals does not mean that you can make finless porpoises obedient. But he had no other option, so he let Su Ming give it a try. When Su Ming walked into the treatment room, a shocking scene happened. The big finless porpoise, which had always been disobedient, suddenly calmed down. He even pushed himself up hard and crawled to Su Ming's feet. His big head rubbed against Su Ming's legs intimately. He had lost all his previous naughtiness and was clearly a well-behaved and obedient person. The little girl, or the little young woman. Several medical staff and Professor Chu were stunned on the spot, with confused expressions on their faces. "Where's the medicine?" Su Ming hooked his fingers at Liang Shi, who was preparing the medicine. Liang Shi just woke up from a dream and hurriedly handed Su Ming a large syringe filled with medicine. Su Ming knelt down and touched the big finless porpoise's head and said, "Be good, open your mouth." In the past, it was very troublesome to give medicine to the giant finless porpoise. You had to fix it with a bandage first, and then 2 people opened its mouth forcefully and injected the medicine into its mouth. Even so, most of the medicine would be spit out by the giant finless porpoise. "Come out." But at this time, the finless porpoise seemed to understand Su Ming's simple words. He opened his mouth honestly and allowed Su Ming to inject the potion. The potion was bitter and astringent. After the big finless porpoise ate it, its 2 fins slapped its mouth hard several times, and it made a dissatisfied whine from its mouth, as if it was unpalatable. "Eat a candy." Su Ming took out a toffee from his pocket, peeled it open, and stuffed it into the mouth of the finless porpoise. "Don't feed it randomly." Liang Shi was about to stop Su Ming, but Professor Chu, who had been observing from the side, stopped Liang Shi. Su Ming fed several other medicines to the finless porpoise, and finally fed some sea bass as food. After the finless porpoise had eaten and drank enough, it was finally willing to lie down in the water to recuperate. Liang Shi quickly took advantage of this opportunity and attached several metal pieces connected to the instrument to the surface of the finless porpoise's body, and stared at the instrument to observe the finless porpoise's recovery status. Professor Chu pulled Su Ming out of the treatment room and asked, "Xiao Su, do you have any ideas? Why does the finless porpoise listen to you so much?" Su Ming felt funny in his heart. This is not nonsense. When the big finless porpoise was dying, he instilled spiritual power into it for 6 or 7 consecutive hours, leaving an indelible mark on the big finless porpoise's consciousness. In addition, he could communicate directly with the finless porpoise. It would be strange if you disobey. But he couldn't tell Professor Chu openly. Su Ming smiled and said, "It's nothing special. It's probably just like Director Song said. I saved it, so it trusts me more." This reason is obviously a bit far-fetched, but besides that, Professor Chu really can't think of any other explanation. Besides, the intelligence of the finless porpoise is very high, about the same as that of a 3 or 4-year-old child. There is no reason to reason with children of this age. They often act according to their feelings and listen to whoever they like. At this time, Liang Shi hurried out of the treatment room, holding the detector in his hand with a look of surprise, and said, "Teacher, you see, the recovery effect of the finless porpoise is particularly good this time, and the efficacy has even exceeded the best expectation by more than 20%. Oh! Better than the best expectation." Professor Chu was happy, but also a little confused. Exceeding the best expectation is of course a good thing. But the efficacy of the medicine is verified by scientific calculations, and the upper and lower limits of the efficacy are derived from countless scientific experiments. The medicine bought for the finless porpoise is also high-end, and there is no counterfeiting. How can it exceed the best efficacy? He looked at Su Ming puzzledly, as if he wanted to find the answer from Su Ming's expression. Su Ming laughed and said in a fake way, "It's just like people. If you are in a good mood, you will recover well." It sounds reasonable. Professor Chu finally understood that Su Ming must have some magic tricks, but it was impossible to get them out of his mouth. He flicked a few scattered hairs on his forehead and said to Su Ming, "Well, since the finless porpoises are in a good mood when they see you, you will have to work hard during this period. You will come to the treatment room for an hour 3 times a day in the morning, noon, and evening, and be responsible for feeding the finless porpoises with medicine." "What about my main job?" Su Ming asked. "Saving the finless porpoises is the greatest contribution to the country." So Su Ming, a temporary worker, became a person who had to go to the treatment room on time every day to go to work and contribute to the country. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 85. For a week, Su Ming devoted himself almost wholeheartedly to treating the finless porpoise. He said he would treat the finless porpoise 3 times a day for an hour. In fact, he spent almost all day in the treatment room from morning to night, staying with the finless porpoise. The finless porpoise recovered much faster than anyone expected. By Saturday, it was almost fully recovered, but for safety reasons, it would still have to be observed for a few days. Therefore, Su Ming had some free time today and took the 2 little guys out on the lake. After the arrival of the finless porpoise and those big fish, the number of tourists showed a spurt of growth. Although the cruise ship business was suspended, the feed business was extremely popular, because most of the feed was marine fish, which could not only be fed to ordinary domestic fish, small finless porpoises also like to eat. Occasionally, if you are lucky, you can even lead to those giant fish weighing more than a pound, which makes tourists exclaim. In the past few days, tons of feed have been sold every day, and the income has made up for the losses of the cruise ship. In just 1 week, the 3 nurses at the health center and Master Peng and the others who sold feed have made a lot of money. It's just as much as 1 month's salary. When Su Ming entered the treatment room, Liang Shi was holding a notebook, observing the giant finless porpoise and recording something in preparation for his graduation thesis. Seeing Su Ming coming, Liang Shi quickly put down his notebook and said, "Hello, Brother Su, you are here." Su Ming nodded and touched the big finless porpoise's head. The big finless porpoise immediately turned over and twisted its belly towards Su Ming in a coquettish manner. "How is your recovery?" Su Ming half asked the finless porpoise, half asked Liang Shi. "Yes, that's good. We can stop taking the medicine completely tomorrow. Teacher Tang is writing a summary report for me." "What about your thesis?" "This time there are 3 finless porpoises for you to use as material." "There should be no problem, right?" Su Ming asked with a smile. Liang Shi scratched his head and smiled naively, "There should be no problem. Many old experts in China who specialize in finless porpoise research do not have such an opportunity. I am lucky this time, thanks to you, Teacher Tang and Brother Su." "Say. Get up, this time has caused trouble to Brother Su and delayed your business. After it is weaned off the medicine, Mr. Tang will arrange to transport it to the provincial capital and raise it with those Beiji dolphins." "What, you want to transport it away?" Su Ming frowned slightly. "Yes," Liang Shi said matter-of-factly, "we can't keep it in the Shuahun Lake." "Why not?" Su Ming pointed to the water outside and said, "This water area is large enough and the water quality is good. There is no problem in raising a few of them." Liang Shi shook his head. "The equipment conditions in Yangchuan City are relatively poor. There is a large conservation center in the provincial capital with complete facilities and personnel. Generally, if endangered or injured aquatic creatures are found, they will be sent to the conservation center in the provincial capital. In the future, they will be raised. The breeding and release training are also done by the provincial capital." Hearing what Liang Shi said, Su Ming was a little annoyed. "I had been busy for a long time, but ended up making wedding clothes for others." Liang Shi saw Su Ming's face darken, and he couldn't say anything. He was just a student. It was not his turn to make the decision on such a big matter. Even if he wanted to help, he couldn't do anything. "Don't get me wrong, this matter has nothing to do with you, you are busy with your business." Seeing that Liang Shi didn't look good, Su Ming waved his hand at him, indicating that he shouldn't feel guilty or anything about it, then turned around and left the treatment room, heading straight to Principal Song's office. I briefly explained the situation to Director Song. After hearing this, Director Song also smiled bitterly. "Do you think I don't want to keep the finless porpoise in the zoo? Are you kidding me? I can't ask for it. Our zoo doesn't have many national first-class protected animals, and even fewer aquatic creatures. Look, there's not even a small aquarium. If we can keep 3 finless porpoises, it will definitely help the development of our zoo. Then can you mention it to the superiors and leave the finless porpoise here?" Su Ming carried the water bottle and filled the cup in front of Director Song. Director Song picked up the cup and took a sip of water before continuing, "It's useless. You may not know about some situations. Yangchuan City and the provincial capital are both top cities in our province, because the provincial capital is at the administrative level higher than Yangchuan City, so it has always been faintly suppressing Yangchuan City. As for Yangchuan City, in fact, it does not buy the account of the provincial capital. The two sides have been fighting openly and covertly in all aspects, including the ownership of the finless porpoise this time. The finless porpoise was found in Huading Reservoir, and it must belong to Yangchuan City," Su Ming said. "You say that, but there are other opinions in the provincial capital. Huading Reservoir is connected to the Yangtze River. These finless porpoises obviously swam into the reservoir from the Yangtze River when the gates were opened. Why do you say they must be from Yangchuan City? Besides, well, finless porpoise is the Commonwealth of China and even the Earth. It is not owned by one place or city. If you take off this big hat, what do you say?" Song Laowen has probably experienced this kind of thing many times, and his tone is a little angry. "Damn it, they know how to slap the blame, but the leaders of Yangchuan City won't, Su Ming said cursingly. Director Song smiled bitterly. Just from the perspective of protecting the finless porpoise itself, we can't compare with the provincial capital. The hardware and software of the protection center in the provincial capital far exceed any animal protection institution in Yangchuan City, and it is the best in the country. Where are the finless porpoises? They can receive better care. Also, Liang Shi told you, it is common practice for endangered animals to be sent to the provincial capital protection center. Director Song sighed. With so many reasons accumulated, it is a foregone conclusion that the finless porpoise will be sent to the provincial capital. Director Wang doesn't care. Su Ming said angrily. After all, this was one of Wang Jianshi's political achievements. Why would he be willing to give it to others for nothing? Director Song shook his head, lowered his voice slightly, and said, actually, if you observe carefully, you should be able to find some signs. For example, the leader of the special team this time is Director Wang of our Yangchuan City, but he started from scratch in the end. They only showed up 2 or 3 times, and they didn't ask too much about the group's affairs. On the contrary, Professor Chu from the Provincial Academy of Agricultural Sciences, as the deputy leader, and his students were actually in charge of the group's work. You think about why. Su Ming originally thought that this was because Professor Chu was a professional, but when Director Song said this, Su Ming pondered for a moment and suddenly realized. Oh, I understand. The Provincial Academy of Agricultural Sciences is in the provincial capital, and the Protection Center is also in charge of the Academy of Agricultural Sciences. Director Wang has long known that even if the finless porpoise is found, it will eventually be sent to the provincial capital. We can't say that there is no such thing here in Yangchuan City, but the lion's share of the credit and the various subsequent benefits brought by the finless porpoise actually belong to the provincial capital, so he doesn't bother to worry too much about this matter, just go through the motions and deal with it. Director Song nodded. Actually, Lao Chu and the others, like me, are scholars at heart, and they still have a love for protecting animals. They may not think so much, but in fact, it is what you said. Do you want to? I think you, me, Director Wang, and even the city all hope that the finless porpoise can stay in Yangchuan City. It is an animal even rarer than the giant panda. If it is done well, it might become a major feature of Yangchuan City. However, no one took the initiative to bring it up. Why, everyone knows that even if it is brought up, it cannot be done. So, there is nothing we can do. If it doesn't work, what about keeping the 2 little finless porpoises? Su Ming asked. That's even more impossible. Director Song shook his head helplessly. Xiao Su, don't think too much. No matter what, even if the finless porpoise is sent away, your contribution cannot be erased. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 86. After coming out from Principal Song, Su Ming was still a little unwilling. The ownership of national first-level protected animals like the finless porpoise belongs to the country, not to a certain province or city, nor to individual private property. But in actual operation, there is a big difference in who is responsible for raising and managing finless porpoises. Just like Zhao Yun, the state prohibits the sale of most of the collections in his private museum. To put it bluntly, they are state property, and Zhao Yun is just a custodian. But over the past decade or so, with the help of these collections that belonged to the country, Zhao Yunhuan became prosperous and became an upper-class celebrity in Yangchuan City, and even had many powerful connections overseas. Therefore, from an economic point of view, the finless porpoise must stay. From a personal and emotional point of view, the finless porpoise family is equivalent to his friends. After getting along for a period of time, the 2 parties have established a friendship, and it is difficult to accept an abrupt separation. If someone suddenly wanted to take the wolfdog brothers and cats away from Su Ming would definitely not agree. Even if it was Datu, Urgoze, and even those crocodile gars, Su Ming would not be willing to give them to others. Besides, without me, the finless porpoise family would have died long ago, and it's your turn to point fingers and take credit. He sat in the waterside pavilion, thought for a while, and called Wang Hao. Looking for my dad, Wang Hao was stunned for a moment, then joked, "Hey, Lao Su, you are getting better and better, and you are now on par with my old man. What a coincidence, my dad was talking about you 2 days ago. Let me learn more from you." Soon, a rich voice came from the other end of the phone, Wang Jianxi. After listening to Su Ming's words, Wang Jianxi thought for a moment and said, "Director Song is right, although Yangchuan City also hopes to have custody of these fish." Su Ming curled his lips and thought to the leader, "Finless porpoise is not a fish. You are also in charge of gardening, agriculture and fishery. Can you be more professional?" But there is no need to dwell on these details, just wait to hear Wang Jianxi's But, let's think about it, there is no operational possibility, for the reason Lao Song has also told you. Besides, I am in a position where I can't speak easily. Those who can reach Wang Jianxi's position are all talented people. Although Wang Jianxi also admires Su Ming, Wang Jianxi will not rashly propose to keep the finless porpoise before he is fully sure. If the final thing cannot be done, this will give the superior leaders the feeling that Wang Jianxi's work is unreliable. Wang Jianxi pondered for a moment and then said, "Well, if you are really sure that you can keep these fish, you can ask Director Song to apply and make a report in the name of the zoo. Come here, I will ask the city for instructions and follow the procedures. The zoo has the responsibility to protect animals, and developing its own business is also part of the question. The zoo proposes to keep the finless porpoise, and then reports it at all levels. Even if it fails in the end, Wang Jianxi will not have any responsibility." There was no other way now, so Su Ming communicated with Director Song again. Director Song thought about it and realized that this was a glimmer of hope, so he drafted a proposal that day. Recommendations on keeping 3 wild finless porpoises in Yangchuan Zoo for raising and raising. The proposal went through several procedures and was sent to Wang Jianxi's office. Wang Jianxi read it over and took some other agricultural and forestry documents to the municipal party committee and found a deputy mayor in charge of this aspect. "Old Wang, what do you think? Leaders generally do not take the initiative to express their opinions." After reading all the documents, Vice Mayor Sun singled out the report from the zoo and asked Wang Jianxi. Wang Jianxi pondered for a moment and did not answer directly. Instead, he smiled and said, "Fortunately, the finless porpoise is still in the zoo now. If it had been transported away, there would really be nothing to talk about." Vice Mayor Sun also laughed and said, "Then let's have a meeting and talk with the people in the provincial capital. To be honest, it's unlikely. But if we don't fight, there's no chance at all," Wang Jianxi said. "Just a word from the leader and the people below are busy breaking their legs." That night, the deputy mayor in charge of agriculture, forestry, and fishery in the provincial capital, the director below, and the Academy of Agricultural Sciences received a letter from Yangchuan City. Yangchuan City formed a team led by Vice Mayor Sun and Wang. The construction supervisor's team is responsible for contacting and negotiating with the other party. What a joke. Old Song, don't you know the conditions of your zoo? Do you have special equipment and professionals? What will happen to the reproduction of finless porpoises in the future? Who will be responsible for training the young finless porpoises to release into the wild? Who will take care of the finless porpoises? Daily life. On both sides of the round table in the conference room, 2 rows of leaders at all levels. Saturday Professor Chu directed his former classmates and Principal Song with a barrage of questions. "Old Chu, calm down, we are talking. Wang Jianxi smoothed things over with a smile. Director Song said calmly, Old Chu, what you said is wrong. No, we can build it or buy it without us. With the finless porpoise, we can just develop supporting facilities. Old Song, you said it easily. Of course, with the economic strength of Yangchuan City, I believe it can be done, but it will not happen in a day or two. If there is any problem with the finless porpoise during this period, who will be responsible? The speaker was Director Zhang from the provincial capital, and he was leading the team in the provincial capital for this meeting. The provincial capital city is half a level higher than Yangchuan City. The level of Director Zhang is barely equal to that of Vice Mayor Sunday. However, Vice Mayor Sun did not attend the meeting. In this way, the levels are completely equal. Lao Zhang, can you guarantee that there will be no problems if you send the finless porpoise to the conservation center? Wang Jianxi picked up the teacup, wiped off the top layer of tea foam with the cup lid, blew on the hot water, and said with a smile, as far as I know, when Lao Chu and the others treated the finless porpoise was very uncooperative and almost died. Even though he died, he was still the backbone of our Yangchuan Zoo. Comrade Xiao Su solved the problem with the help of Comrade Xiao Su. Speaking further, during the search, the comrades from the Academy of Agricultural Sciences failed to find the finless porpoise despite all their efforts. It was Xiao Su who found the finless porpoise's family of 3. Without Xiao Su, the finless porpoise might have died long ago, and there would be no need for us to hold this meeting to discuss the issue of whether to stay or leave the finless porpoise. Professor Chu's face turned dark. A dignified professor and a first-class expert in the field had made major mistakes when searching for and treating finless porpoises. He looked worse than an ordinary zoo employee and a temporary worker. Under such circumstances, how dare you say that the Yangchuan City Zoo cannot take good care of the finless porpoises? Seeing Professor Chu's expression was different, Wang Jianxi put down his teacup and smiled at Professor Chu. Old Chu, don't get me wrong. I'm not questioning your professionalism. What I mean is that our Yangchuan Zoo also has talents. Enough to take good care of the finless porpoise. Professor Chu frowned slightly and said, I would be relieved if Comrade Su Ming was allowed to take care of the finless porpoise, but... Old Wang, the country has spent tens of millions to build a conservation center. If we don't send the finless porpoise to the conservation center, it's against policy. Director Zhang of the provincial capital interrupted Professor Chu's words, glanced at the people in Yangchuan City across the street, and said meaningfully, if I'm right, send the finless porpoise to the protection center. Even if there is an accident, we will, but if we stay in Yangchuan City, the conditions in Yangchuan City are relatively poor. If something happens to the finless porpoise, how will you explain it to your superiors and the people? Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 87. The meeting lasted for more than an hour. After the meeting, Director Song returned to the zoo and told Su Ming the final decision of both parties. According to the original plan, the finless porpoises will be sent to the provincial capital. However, the provincial capital is willing to pay a sum of money, about 100,000 yuan, to reward the meritorious personnel of this special rescue and protection team. To put it bluntly, the meritorious personnel are Su Ming and the zoo, and they use money to shut them up. In addition, after the finless porpoises are sent to the provincial capital protection center, the Yangchuan City Zoo can send people to the protection center at any time to participate in the research, raising and future release of finless porpoises. They are smart and ruthless. They send people there and work for them for nothing, Director Song said, a little unconvinced. At the negotiation table, Yangchuan City has actually gained the upper hand. There is no equipment to buy, and Su Ming is here as a technician. Shuahun Lake is currently a ready-made living place for finless porpoises. If it doesn't work, a part of the reservoir can be allocated for the finless porpoises to live. But the final word was the words of Director Zhang of the provincial capital. Sending the finless porpoise to the conservation center is in accordance with the rules, but keeping it in Yangchuan is an exception and a violation of the system. It's fine, but if the finless porpoise has any problem, everyone will be held responsible, especially the leaders of Yangchuan. The first meeting on the ownership of the finless porpoise ended here. 100,000 yuan, neither Su Ming nor the zoo cared much about it. It's not that the money is small, but compared with the huge value of the finless porpoise, 100,000 yuan seems insignificant and not worth mentioning at all. With the finless porpoise, the zoo's monthly ticket revenue can be more than this money. It's like thinking you picked up a piece of dog head gold, but after identification, you find it's a piece of brass. Brass can also be bought for a few dollars, but compared with the dog head gold, it's pure garbage. Not only did it fail to achieve the goal, but it also alerted the enemy. After this meeting, the provincial capital increased its vigilance. In order to prevent Yangchuan City from using any dirty tricks to keep the finless porpoises, Director Zhang of the provincial capital called the provincial capital that night and asked the protection center to send a car to pick up the finless porpoises. Early in the morning of the third day, a large container with a huge water tank drove into the zoo and came to the side of Shuahun Lake. Professor Chu saw Su Ming and scratched a few strands of hair on his head a little embarrassedly. This, Xiao Su, no matter what, everyone is protecting the finless porpoises. Anyway, I think it's not very kind for the provincial capital to do this. Why should they send all the good things to the provincial capital? Su Ming rolled his eyes and expressed his dissatisfaction directly. Someone in the crowd said loudly, "That's right, it was found in Yangchuan City. The residents of the provincial capital are the people. Are the residents of Yangchuan class enemies?" The first person who spoke was immediately joined by others. Why should you let the provincial capital get it just because it has some benefits? Pure hegemonism, bullying. In addition to the people, reporters from several media received the news overnight and came to the zoo early in the morning, setting up long guns and short guns to film the transportation of the finless porpoises. Xiao Su, the reason cannot be explained clearly in a few words, I just hope you can understand it. Professor Chu smiled bitterly, then waved to his students and said loudly, "Load the finless porpoises, pay attention to safety." The 3 finless porpoises were wrapped in waterproof cloth, and a mechanical arm appeared on the container truck, which hoisted the 3 finless porpoises into the large water tank at the back one by one. After the porpoise entered the water tank, it swam around a bit dazedly. The family of 3 saw Su Ming through the transparent glass box and gathered in Su Ming's direction. They waved at Su Ming with their fins across the aquarium. "You must be obedient in the future." Su Ming stretched out a hand and pressed it on the glass across the box. The 3 porpoises didn't know what happened yet. When they saw Su Ming reaching out his hand, the big porpoise also used its round head to push Su Ming's hand through the glass. "Okay, let's go," Professor Chu said. The container started moving slowly, and Su Ming followed behind for 2 steps. The porpoises looked at Su Ming, who was getting farther and farther away from them, and then they realized that Su Ming was not going with them. The 2 little porpoises immediately cried out anxiously, and even stood up, trying to get their heads out from the lid and edge of the water tank. But compared with the narrow gap, their heads were too big and they couldn't get through at all. The big porpoise looked in the direction of Su Ming, swimming anxiously, constantly hitting the glass water tank with its head and tail, making a thumping sound and splashing water. Seeing this, the container truck had to stop, and a group of reporters and Su Ming also hurriedly caught up with the container truck. "What's going on?" Professor Chu frowned and asked. "Is there any need to ask this? These porpoises can't bear to leave their owner," Nangongyan shouted loudly. "Look, the porpoises are crying." I saw that all 3 porpoises had stood up in the water tank, like little prisoners, lying pitifully on the transparent glass, their fins slapping the glass one after another, their little eyes looking at Su Ming, leaving a few lines of tears as clear as spring water in the corners of their eyes. Seeing this scene, Many people fell silent. Professor Chu's nose was a little sour. He clearly remembered that many years ago, they rescued a porpoise that was hit by a fishing boat. Before the porpoise died, it shed tears just like today. "Mom, they are all bad guys, the finless porpoises are so pitiful." A young girl's voice rang out in the crowd, with a sobbing tone. Someone shouted, "They can't take the finless porpoises away. The finless porpoises belong to our Yangchuan city. Protect our finless porpoises." The crowd rushed over and formed a human wall, surrounding the container truck in the middle and refused to let it go. "What are you doing?" Professor Chu glared at Su Ming fiercely, stood on the car, and shouted to the crowd, "This is the government's decision, and no one can change it. Sending the finless porpoises to the protection center is also for their good. Comrades, everyone should understand." The crowd didn't buy his account. "Understand shit. If you stay, we will understand." Professor Chu was in a state of panic. He jumped out of the car and pulled Su Ming, whispering, "Xiao Su, don't mess around. If there is a mass incident, we can't take the responsibility." "Professor Chu, I didn't instigate this." "I can't take the responsibility," Su Ming said. "This matter was really not instigated by him. Friends of Animals is not strong enough to manipulate people. Call Lao Song. If we call the police to solve it, everyone will be embarrassed." Professor Chu turned around and ordered a student. Director Song came quickly. After understanding the situation, although he was unwilling, he still patiently enlightened the people around. After more than an hour of commotion, even the police from the police station came. After a long time of guidance, the people finally made way. The container truck restarted and slowly drove out. This time, before driving 10 meters, a loud bang was heard from the water tank. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 88. There was a loud bang. The giant finless porpoise slammed its head against the glass as if it was about to commit suicide. The glass of the aquarium containing the finless porpoise is a special thick and tempered glass that cannot be broken even by a shark, let alone the finless porpoise. Although the glass was not broken, the large aquarium shook violently, and water splashed out along the gap in the lid, splashing everywhere in the car. The container truck had no choice but to stop again, but the big finless porpoise seemed to be going crazy and hit the glass of the water tank desperately. Bang! 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 The sound was like an explosion, which made people a little scared, and the whole carriage shook slightly. "It's a big deal now?" The big finless porpoise had been injured on its forehead, and the scar had just healed. After several impacts, the wound suddenly opened again. A stream of Yin Hong's blood emerged from the big finless porpoise's forehead, and bloodshot threads spread rapidly in the water tank. After a while, when Professor Chu rushed to the back to check the situation, the water in the water tank had been dyed light red. The big finless porpoise also had a large piece of damage on its head. Even so, it still hit the glass without mercy. Professor Chu's face suddenly turned pale. Not only was Lao Chu almost pissed with fear, but Su Ming's scalp was also numb. He quickly ran over and released his spiritual power into the aquarium. Speaking of which, the giant finless porpoise causing trouble by hitting the glass is of course related to Su Ming. This is a dirty trick he came up with. Regarding the ownership of the finless porpoise, it is actually very simple. As long as the big finless porpoise refuses to leave, no one can do anything about it. Su Ming's plan was to let the giant finless porpoise make some movement, hit it slightly, and toss it around to show that it refused to leave. Firstly, it attracts the attention of the onlookers, and secondly, there are so many reporters present. When the TV station reports it, public opinion will be overwhelming, and 80% of the time the giant finless porpoise will be left in the end. But I never expected that the giant finless porpoise actually lost control of the fake show, hit it too hard, and actually became suicidal. It's also to blame that Su Ming was careless this time. He ignored the most basic common sense. Although the finless porpoise is smart, after all, no one is as fickle as anyone else. He can't turn his thoughts, let alone act. When he found out that he was really going to be separated from Su Ming, the big finless porpoise was extremely reluctant to part with him. The collision was so hard, there was no drama at all, it was purely an expression of true love. In any case, animals are animals after all, and their intelligence cannot be compared with humans. If the thing in the aquarium was not the finless porpoise but Wang Hao, Su Ming believed that he would definitely put on a wonderful show. The big finless porpoise was injured, and the two small finless porpoises desperately slapped the glass with their fins, making heart-rending screams, asking Su Ming for help. Su Ming gritted his teeth and released all his mental power without reservation, comforting the finless porpoise and treating its injuries. It was better now. The public anger that had just calmed down was once again exploded. The onlookers rushed up to surround the car. Several young people even opened the door and pulled out the driver and a student of Professor Chu. He even dragged him down, raised his fist and was about to hit him. "Dear friends, please calm down. Professor Chu has worked for animal protection all his life, and he doesn't want this to happen." Seeing this, Su Ming quickly jumped into the car and shouted to the angry crowd. It was just a drama in the first place, but if it really hurt someone, the nature would be different. Besides, Professor Chu and the others were pretty good people. They just had disagreements with themselves, so there was no need to hurt them. "Do they still want to take away the finless porpoise?" someone asked loudly. "This is not protection at all, but murder. They must not be allowed to take away the finless porpoise. Let them say it themselves, keep the finless porpoise." Lao Chu's mouth was full of bitterness and he was depressed to death. It was like this, and he still had a fart. The big finless porpoise has made it clear that if it is taken away, it will commit suicide. If the car drives out again, its brains will probably be knocked out. You can't take a dead finless porpoise back. If you take away the finless porpoise forcibly and cause the finless porpoise to commit suicide, the Provincial Academy of Agricultural Sciences and the provincial capital and municipal government will not get any credit at all, but it will be a major accident. Lao Chu, he was criticized by thousands of people, and his reputation was turned into water. The entire academic circle could not tolerate him. Besides, his real purpose is not to compete for fame or fortune, but to protect the endangered animal, the finless porpoise. Even if he asks to be taken to a conservation center, it is only from the perspective of considering the survival of the finless porpoise. If he cannot protect the finless porpoise and ends up forcing the finless porpoise to death, he will really become a sinner. To put it more seriously, whoever forces the finless porpoise to death will not only be ruined, but may even go to jail. I won't take it with me anymore. I won't take it with me for the time being. Hurry up and send the big finless porpoise to the treatment room and the two smaller ones back to the Shuahun Lake, Professor Chu almost yelled. The ownership of the finless porpoise is no longer important now. Saving the life of the giant finless porpoise is the most important thing. That afternoon, the TV station reported a scene in the zoo. The finless porpoise refused to leave the zoo. It first burst into tears and then hit its head against the wall. The scene of dying to make one's ambition clear, combined with Nangong Yan's heartbreakingly sad tone, instantly aroused everyone's sympathy. The media at the zoo at that time, including not only TV stations, but also newspapers and websites, immediately reported the incident, which attracted great attention. By evening, this news, which was originally just about finless porpoise, gradually began to ferment, pointing the finger at the provincial capital government. Many netizens and viewers have raised very sharp views, believing that this tragedy was caused by the provincial capital's disregard for the life and death of the finless porpoise in order to achieve political achievements and for the regional interests of their own cities. In just 2 days, This topic has completely exploded like a virus. The finless porpoise is reluctant to leave its lifesaver and dies to show its determination. The last tears, there is no fame and fortune in heaven. The title party said it as if the finless porpoise was dead. Don't let politics kill the last friend of mankind. In a 3-person interview program, a middle-aged host with glasses said, "It is well known that dolphins are the most intelligent animals, but what about finless porpoises? Let's take a look at some photos first." In a famous blind date program, the 6th female guest turned off the lights without hesitation and said to the male guest who boasted that he had raised several expensive pet dogs, "I like loving men. If you really have love, you should be like the keeper in Yangchuan Zoo, and take practical actions to rescue animals in need, instead of standing here and talking big." Not only ordinary people, but also some celebrities have participated. Bless the family of Yangtze River dolphins. Before a reality show started, several celebrities lit red candles at the same time to pray for Yangtze River dolphins. The director of the online drama Jiao Xiao, who replied to the post online last time, proposed to donate money to Yangtze River dolphins and at many famous online figures. A veteran singer in Hong Kong even proposed to adopt some protected animals to support animal protection with practical actions. The so-called adoption and adoption are different. Adoption only brings the animal home, and the adopter will take care of it in the future. In the case of adoption, only a sum of money is paid and a name is added, and the animal is still raised by an animal protection organization such as a zoo. At the same time, it also triggered a trend of showing off pets. Celebrities of all sizes posted close-up photos of themselves and their pets to show their love. Several famous internet celebrities, during live broadcasts, had cats and dogs sitting on their upright chests or slender white legs, acting cute and winning countless rewards. One picture after another was played, one Weibo after another was forwarded, and the Yangchuan City Forum was also blown up by this topic. In Baidu search, the word Yangtze River porpoise also rushed to the top 3. Fortunately, the protagonist of the incident, the Yangtze River porpoise, recovered quickly under Su Ming's care. A few days later, Yangchuan City and the provincial capital held another meeting, and the meeting location was still the same room as before. The second discussion meeting on the ownership of wild Yangtze River porpoises. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 89. Same location, same participants, same topics. But the mood of both parties participating in the meeting was completely different from last time. The conference service staff made tea for all the participating leaders and brought it to the table. Wang Jianxi, the actual person in charge of Yangchuan City, raised the teacup and slowly scraped the foam floating on it with the cup lid. Smiled and said to the comrades in the provincial capital opposite, "Everyone, drink tea, drink tea." Director Song was not in a hurry to speak, his eyes were half open and half closed, as if he was wandering. On the contrary, the faces of several people from the provincial capital opposite, Director Zhang and Professor Chu, did not look good. After the finless porpoise incident was reported a few days ago, they immediately came under pressure from all aspects. Various media called and interviewed them all day long, asking very sharp questions, which made them anxious. That's all for the media. The key is that the superior leaders called them more than once to ask them what happened. How could such a happy event lead to such a big mess? Now the whole country, and even compatriots from Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan are paying attention to this matter. Even the main leaders of the province have personally asked about it once. The city leaders of Jiangnan City, the provincial capital, gave them very clear instructions. First, resolve the finless porpoise incident as soon as possible to minimize the impact. We must not allow the finless porpoise incident to continue to ferment and cause worse impacts. Second, we must still try our best to fight for the ownership rights of the finless porpoise. When the matter has reached this point, it is actually no longer a simple finless porpoise issue. Behind it, there is a faint competition between the two major cities in the province. To put it more seriously, the provincial leaders are watching from above. Which official from both sides can handle this matter better, win over the finless porpoise, and not cause resentment among the people, whoever is more capable in the eyes of the leaders. The tiny finless porpoise even affects the career of both parties to a certain extent. Of course, this impact is not decisive, nor can it be said to be serious. At most, it just makes the superiors look at it a little higher. But the political achievements of officials are accumulated bit by bit in this way, not to mention that in the officialdom, no one wants to be stepped on by others to climb up. So the actual situation before us now is that in terms of procedures and material conditions, the finless porpoise should belong to the provincial Aitsukai city. However, judging from public opinion and the current actual situation of the finless porpoise, it is more appropriate for Yangchuan City to retain the finless porpoise. The leaders on both sides had their own concerns. No one spoke first and took the initiative to mention this issue to avoid being disadvantaged. Professor Chu, who was still a scholar, couldn't help it anymore. He coughed lightly and said, "Old song, the finless porpoise refuses to leave this time. To put it bluntly, he just can't bear to leave Suming in your zoo. Go talk to him and let him go, he handles it." How to deal with it? Principal Song finally opened his eyes. "Old Song, classmates are classmates, and the truth is the truth. I have to make this clear. It is true that the finless porpoise kissed him, and Xiao Su also has some weird talents in dealing with animals, but in the final analysis, and the finless porpoise can't understand human speech, what do you want Xiao Su to do? Do you want him to tell the finless porpoise, be obedient, don't make trouble, and follow the leaders of the province, and there will be good food and drink in the province, and then the finless porpoise will, can I just follow you and be obedient?" When Director Song said this, Wang Jianxi laughed on the side, and Professor Chu stared. "Old Song, when did I say that the finless porpoise can understand Su Ming's words? Aren't you being so messy? It's too heavy, Old Chu, what you said is too serious." "I don't think Director Song meant it that way." Director Zhang of Jinhai City quickly smoothed things over. In a meeting of this level, using words like messing around was not in line with their status. They could fight over each other secretly, but on the surface they still wanted to be harmonious. He looked at Wang Jianxi and said, "Old Wang, how about you see if this works? You talk to Xiao Su and ask him to cooperate with us. We will take away the finless porpoise. Then, we will work on several other cooperation projects. You can give in a little bit. Both cities are in the same province and both have relatively good economies. There is competition on the one hand and cooperation on the other. Director Zhang and Wang Jianxi are responsible for the same work in their respective cities. In addition to finless porpoise, there are also many other current items. If Director Zhang is relieved, some of Wang Jianxi's work will go more smoothly. This benefit is not insignificant." Unexpectedly, Wang Jianxi shook his head directly. "Lao Zhang, let's do it one by one. This is talking about the finless porpoise. Don't let the topic go astray." Seeing that although Wang Jianxi was smiling, his attitude was very firm, Director Zhang frowned slightly and said, "Do you have to keep the finless porpoise in Yangchuan?" "We don't have to keep them, it's the finless porpoise's own wish." "Old Wang, don't be ridiculous, what does the finless porpoise have its own wishes?" Wang Jianxi opened his phone with a smile and pulled out some news. Okay, it's not the will of the finless porpoise, but it's always the will of the people. Look online and on TV, now the people are strongly demanding that the finless porpoise be kept. In Yangchuan, Laojiang, this is also serving the people." During the private meeting, Wang Jianxi brought out this big hat, which made Director Zhang very speechless. He glared at Wang Jianxi angrily and said, "Old Wang, if you say that, we the people of Jinhai City, aren't they the people?" The two sides were back and forth, and the negotiations reached a deadlock again. At this time, Director Jiang's cell phone suddenly received a text message from his secretary. His eyes lit up and he laughed. "Old Wang, to put it bluntly, the key point of this matter lies in Comrade Su Ming of the zoo. This young comrade is outstanding in his work and has strong abilities, but how can such a good comrade still be a temporary worker without a regular position in the zoo?" Without waiting for Wang Jianxi to speak, Director Zhang turned his head and asked Professor Chu, "Old Chu, if he is transferred to your Academy of Agricultural Sciences and given a regular position, it will not be a big problem, right?" Professor Chu's eyes lit up. "No problem, I'll talk to Zhao." The Zhao he mentioned is the president of the Provincial Academy of Agricultural Sciences, and also Professor Chu's disciple. Even if there was no Yangtze River dolphin incident, Professor Chu would have gotten a regular position in the Academy of Agricultural Sciences with just one sentence. Director Zhang nodded. "Not only the Academy of Agricultural Sciences, I suggest that he can be transferred directly to the Protection Center. He has skills, so he is a special recruit and can be directly appointed as a deputy section level clerk. In addition, the Bureau allocated a bonus of 100,000 yuan for meritorious personnel last time, so we can add more." "Old Zhang, what do you mean by this? You are directly snatching people away." Wang Jianxi was not happy, his face sank slightly. "What you can give, we can't give." "Old Song." Director Song said slowly, "Hey, I'm old, and I will retire in a few years. Xiao Su is worth training as a successor." "Haha, Old Song, don't you fooled me. Your zoo will soon be restructured to be self-financing. If he takes over, it will be like taking on a big burden." Director Zhang waved his hand nonchalantly and said, "In my opinion, we should ask Xiao Su's own wishes. In the eyes of normal people, Jinhai is the provincial capital, and its level is half a level higher than Yangchuan. The provincial government is also in Jinhai, and even if it is the same level, the development prospects and income in Jinhai are far better than Yangchuan. What's more, the zoo will soon be restructured, and the protection center is an idle iron rice bowl. As long as the country exists, the protection center will be supported by the country. As long as you are sane, you will know what to choose." Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 90. Director Zhang of the provincial capital certainly couldn't call Su Ming directly in the conference room, that would be too disrespectful to Yangchuan City. In fact, after finding out that Su Ming was still a temporary worker, Director Zhang sent a text message to his secretary, asking the secretary to go directly to the zoo to find Su Ming. While the conference room was still arguing, Director Jiang's secretary had already found Su Ming. As long as you are a secretary of a leader, you need to be good at speaking, writing, and drinking. If it is a female secretary, you may have to add another skill. However, this secretary is a man, and he is very efficient. After finding Su Ming, he said a lot of things. Starting from the facts, I analyzed Su Ming's current temporary worker status. With your talent and merits, you are wronged in a small zoo that is in danger of losing your life every day, and you are a temporary worker feeding bears. It is purely a waste of money. I feel deeply sorry for you. This is called presenting facts and reasoning." Then, the secretary changed the subject and talked about how good the development opportunities in the provincial capital were, how the leaders valued talents, and what could happen if Su Ming was willing to work in the provincial capital. He analyzed the benefits promised by Director Zhang one by one with Su Ming. This is called negotiating conditions and promising benefits. At the end, the secretary changed the subject again and his tone became serious. This dispute over the Yangtze River dolphin has brought a lot of negative impact to the governments of the two places. If it is not resolved as soon as possible, it will greatly damage the reputation of the government and greatly affect the friendship between the two cities. The key to solving the problem lies in your choice, Xiaosu. Comrade Xiaosu, you must put the overall situation first, make a wise choice, contribute to the country, and share the worries of the government. This is understanding the righteousness, talking about politics, and using big hats to pressure people. The secretary brother took turns with 3 axes, his attitude changed several times in an instant, and he used both soft and hard methods. This set of methods to deal with ordinary people has been invincible in the past. I thought that Su-ming, a young man, would waver and struggle in his heart even if he could not make a decision for a while. Who would have thought that Su-ming would sit there and listen to him seriously from beginning to end, nodding from time to time, and making hum sounds in response, but he didn't say a word. He let him talk nonsense until he was dry-mouthed, but Su-ming didn't respond at all. When the secretary brother finished speaking, Su-ming handed him a glass of water and asked with a smile, "Brother, are you thirsty? Drink water, drink water." The secretary was speechless, holding the water cup, stunned for a long time, and then said, "Xiaosu, you have to make a decision as soon as possible." Su-ming laughed. "Of course, Director Zhang thinks so highly of me, I am deeply moved. However, I have to discuss this matter with our zoo leaders. After all, I am still an employee of the zoo." At this point, the secretary probably understood what Su-ming meant. The zoo leader is Director Song, and above him is Director Wang. What can be discussed with them? To put it bluntly, Su-ming rejected him very tactfully in a way that no one would lose face. "Leader, that kid is very difficult to deal with." After leaving the zoo, the secretary sent a text message to Director Zhang. Director Zhang, who was in a meeting, saw the text message and his face darkened again. For these finless porpoises, old Zhang couldn't remember how many times his face darkened. Seeing that Director Jiang's expression suddenly changed, Wang Jianxi and Director Song in Yang Chuan smiled at each other. Wang Jianxi said with a smile, "Old Zhang, how about we call Su-ming and ask him what he thinks?" "There is no need for that," Director Zhang said. Director Song said lightly, "I know this kid Su. He is a very loyal person and has strong working ability. Unless he insists on leaving, our zoo will never let him go." As a result, the second meeting was completely deadlocked and the issue was shelved again. After the meeting, Director Zhang pulled Wang Jianxi aside and asked with a stern face, "Old Wang, it's not a good idea to keep dragging it out like this. This matter must be resolved as soon as possible. Please set a condition." "What conditions do you need to allow us to take the finless porpoise away?" Wang Jianxi thought for a moment and said, "Old Zhang, I'll tell you the truth. The finless porpoise is a hot potato now. If you can take it away, we won't stop you. But if you can't take it away, you must stay in Yangchuan City. Just like you said, you can't always argue about this matter." On the way back to the zoo, Director Song called Su-ming and learned from the phone that Director Jiang's secretary had come. That group of people in the provincial capital are actually doing these little tricks in secret. "He, Xiao Su, don't worry. You value friendship, and I, an old man, can't treat you unfairly. After this matter is over, I will help you fight for your staffing and rewards, and Director Wang will also speak for you. In short, you won't suffer any loss," Director Song said. Su-ming was not doing this for a job, as the job was no longer attractive to him, and he didn't care much about the reward of tens of thousands of yuan. Everyone has their own account. Director Zhang was right. If it were someone else, he would probably agree to be transferred to the Provincial Capital Protection Center, but Su-ming had his own ideas. First, although the zoo was not well developed and had a tight financial situation, with only 2 or 3 cats, the total number and variety of animals were far from comparable to that deserted protection center used as a decoration. It was said that there were only a few baiji dolphins in that place, which was not conducive to the development of the ability of animal friends. Secondly, he has already opened up the situation in the zoo, and his interpersonal relationships are very good. The cruise and fish farming business are also progressing steadily. Moreover, Shuahun Lake has been contracted for 3 years. If he leaves now, all his previous efforts will be in vain. Thirdly, although people are all profit-seeking, if they are too fence-sitting and become fence-sitters when there is a little benefit, such people will definitely not last long. The officialdom has its dark side, but it does not mean that there are no rules. No leader will like his subordinates to turn their heads and ignore him when there is a little benefit. Political bitches are not welcome anywhere. Su Ming's decision led to an extreme incident. The next morning at 7 o'clock, the zoo had not yet opened for business, and the container truck that had previously transported the finless porpoises drove into the zoo again. Professor Chu took a few students and a group of medical staff and followed behind in the car. A group of people went straight to the temporary treatment room by Shuahun Lake. As soon as Professor Chu got off the car, he instructed the medical staff to take out a tranquilizer gun from the car. At this point, the provincial capital only had one last method left, which was to anesthetize the finless porpoises and transport them away. The unconscious finless porpoises would not commit suicide by hitting the wall again. Director Song and Su Ming also got the news and rushed over from afar. "Old Song, I'm sorry. For the sake of the finless porpoises, we must take them away." Professor Chu waved his hand, and 3 anesthetic needles, 1 large and 2 small, flew out. It was also difficult for the medical staff. They shot very accurately, and none of the shots missed, and they were firmly stabbed into the 3 finless porpoises. The finless porpoise family looked back at the needles on their bodies, with a look of confusion. The anesthetic had begun to work. After being stabbed, the finless porpoise did not resist or anything, but was motionless in the shallow water, very quiet, occasionally shaking its tail. "Prepare for transportation, be careful not to hurt the finless porpoises." Professor Chu directed the students to start preparations, and the small crane mechanical arm behind the container slowly rose out. The past was ready, and they only waited for the finless porpoises to faint and move them to the container. Unexpectedly, this wait lasted for a full 20 minutes. The 3 porpoises were no different from 20 minutes ago. They were still in the shallow water, twisting their bodies from time to time, looking up and bleating at Su Ming, and they didn't seem to faint at all. "What happened?" Professor Chu was a little dumbfounded.